I'm here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Alexander, it looks like Cyprus is making a lot of news lately. We did a couple of videos recently on the Turkish drilling. They sent their fourth ship to drill off the coast of the Mediterranean, which is recognized as Cyprus' EEZ, exclusive economic zone. But Turkey is claiming that they have rights to drill there. There's a lot of oil and gas. Cyprus is partnered with Israel, with Egypt, with Greece, and the United States to kind of put an umbrella on all this oil activity that is taking place. So the United States is very much, I would say, acting as a protectorate of this oil and gas drilling. And there's definitely a lot of activity here and a lot of money at stake in this region. Now Turkey is also asserting its right to this oil and gas find. And you now have the Cyprus problem, which is restarting. The other day, we had the 45th anniversary of the Turkish invasion and the illegal occupation of the northern part of Cyprus, around 37% of the island. And it looks like we're kind of getting to a scenario, Alexander, where the oil and gas drilling and the dispute as to who has claims over this oil and gas is melding and is coming into intersection with the Cyprus problem, and the fact that just recently, literally a couple of hours ago, Anastasiadis, the president of Cyprus, said that they're looking to restart the negotiations with his counterpart in the north of Cyprus, Akiji, and they want to start it off from where they left off 2 years ago as they were negotiating a solution to reunite the island in Crans-Montana. So those talks fell apart, but they progressed quite significantly. And Anastasiadis is making the overture by the middle of August. Let's restart talks between Cyprus and the breakaway state in the north. Let's try to solve the problem. In the meantime, though, you have all this activity taking place in the Cyprus EEZ. As you know, you have so many countries now drilling for oil, and Turkey is now in the mix. Alexander, how do you see this situation playing out?
I think it's interesting that Anastasiadis has done this, and I'm guessing, but I'm calculating that he probably feels that now that Cyprus has strong backing from the US and that Turkey is now has very difficult relations with the US, that this is his good opportunity for Cyprus to make a strong diplomatic pitch to try to resolve the problem. As, of course, you know, Turkish President Erdogan made an incredibly inflammatory speech, the sort of speech he often makes, in which he talked about Turkey being ready to reinvade Cyprus all over again.
You want me to read you that quote? I have it pulled up. I can read you that quote. And here it is. This is what Erdogan said to the state-run Anadolu news agency. I quote, "The entire world is watching our determination. No one should doubt that the heroic Turkish army, which sees northern Cyprus as its homeland, will not hesitate to take the same step it took 45 years ago, if needed for the lives and security of the Turkish Cypriots." Alexander.
Well, I mean, it's an extraordinarily inflammatory comment. I mean, he also takes notice of northern Cyprus as the Turkish army's homeland, which comes very close almost to saying that, you know, it's part of Turkey now. But I mean, he is also, and we've discussed this on other programs, he must be feeling increasingly a sense of diplomatic isolation. And so I think Anastasiadis is calculating that this is a good moment to speak to the Turkish Cypriots, try to draw this thing down, exploit Turkey's overall weakness at this moment, diplomatically and economically, and push for a solution. I think that's what he's thinking. At the same time, I think he's also probably calculating that many people in Greek, you know, Cyprus itself, are saying to themselves, well, my goodness, I mean, we've got all these threats from Erdogan. We see that the situation is very dangerous. Maybe we should look for a solution too, because if we don't push for a solution, then we could be finding ourselves in all kinds of problems with the Turks further down the line. So I think this is actually, my own feeling is, this is an astute move. And you were quite right in saying that the last time these negotiations took place, they seemed to come very, very close towards achieving an agreement. And interesting, and we discussed this just before we started this video. You were saying that, the fact that he's saying we will resume where we left off suggests that he is really, Anastasiades is really looking for a solution here. And I think he may be reading the international, geometry and saying to himself, this could happen this time. What wasn't possible 2 years ago might happen now.
Right. Go on. Yes.
I mean, and I think he might be right. This is what I was going to say.
Right. And I think you're right, because I think they have to find a solution. To me, it's now or never. That's the way I look at it. And I think that, and I want your thoughts on this. I think that Turkey sending the fourth ship to drill and the other expeditions that they put, to drill for oil and gas they put in place. I don't know if it's really about oil and gas so much as it may be to use as leverage during negotiations. Now, there's been reports in the previous video. We said that Philadelphios, a Cypriot newspaper, said that they had sources that said that they did find oil and gas, the Turkish ships. But actually, I was reading before we did this video that those have now been disputed by Turkish authorities. In other words, they found nothing. But taking the fact if they find oil and gas out of the equation, the fact that they're sending those ships, to me, can you say, or at least to me, it looks like they're kind of, trying to get some leverage over the Cypriot government and the drilling that they're undertaking, and how they use the oil and gas discoveries as leverage during their negotiations with the North. It looks like the Turks are trying to say, okay, well, we've also got drilling going on here, so you don't have anything up on us.
Exactly. I think you're exactly right, and I think this is now clearly the emerging picture. I'd come back to what Erdogan said when he spoke of northern Cyprus as the homeland, part of the Turkish army's homeland. So he's sending ships. He's claiming this enormous economic zone, which of course completely infringes of that on Cyprus. He's making these inflammatory statements. Erdogan, more than anything else, is a man who bargains, and he bargains very hard. And this is how it's beginning to look to me, as if all these Turkish moves should be interpreted. So Erdogan is seeking leverage in the coming negotiations. Anastasiades, I think, senses that this is a good moment for the negotiations. As I said, Turkey is behind all these strong moves that Erdogan is making. Its position is isolated and weaker. Cyprus has the US at its back, or it seems to, but at the same time, the Turks are under some pressure. The people in Cyprus themselves are also under pressure. So this is a good moment, it seems to me, to broker a deal. So I think this is an astute move, and I think it might work. And it may very well be that all these very strong words that we're hearing going backwards and forwards are in fact indicative of a negotiation that's coming.
Alexander, I've got a question for you. I was reading an article in Cyprus Mail from Dr. Charles Elinas, which is titled "The Real Reason Turkey is in the Cyprus EEZ." And he makes an interesting point in that even if there is a lot of oil and gas in the Mediterranean, and in between Israel, Egypt, Cyprus, extending all the way to Greece, and even if Turkey finds oil and gas from their drilling, and say they find a lot, his point is that this gas may not even be able to hit the market at a competitive price in order to deal with the Russian gas, for example, because it's going to be so expensive to extract it and to get it to Europe that it may not even make that much of a difference. It may not even be worth the trouble that we're going through here, and the risks and the increased rhetoric and all of these things that we're seeing now between Turkey, Cyprus, Greece, Israel, the United States, and Russia, and all these things that are playing out in the Mediterranean, because the gas itself, even if it's a big find, still won't be able to compete with the Russian gas and the Nord Streams and all these pipelines. Is that a correct assessment by Dr. Charles Edlinas?
I think it's entirely the correct assessment. In fact, I think we've made this same point in previous videos. I have an acquaintance who's been to the Russian oil, natural gas and liquefied natural gas developments in the Yamal Peninsula in the Arctic. And the sheer scale of operations there utterly dwarfs anything we could realistically hope to do in the Eastern Mediterranean, even if, as you said, this is a big gas find. It can't realistically compete with that. And the story of the last 20 years is of repeated attempts by people in Washington and in Brussels to find alternatives to Russian gas. We had the Nabucco pipeline to Azerbaijan. We had pipelines to North Africa. We've had all kinds of projects, liquefied natural gas in the US, and none of them in the end have been able to compete effectively with the massive supplies of Russian gas, many of which will, of course, now be flowing through Turk Stream or South Stream or whatever it's going to be called now, the pipeline the Russians are building to Turkey through the Black Sea. But having said that, I'm going to say something else. Even if this gas doesn't turn out to be the great, bonanza that I think people hope it will be, if it, this conflict over the gas kickstarts negotiations towards a real settlement of the Cyprus conflict and brings peace to the Eastern Mediterranean, well, frankly, that will be a good thing in itself. And, provided this is a good and proper and fair peace, I personally would support it.
Okay, let me provide a reverse scenario, and that is if the gas leads to conflict. Okay, now I don't take Erdogan's rhetoric where he said he's going to invade again. I think he's just playing to the crowd, and that's Erdogan being Erdogan for the 45th anniversary of the invasion that took place in Cyprus and divided the island. But Alexander, there's a name that always worries me, and I know he worries you. And that name is Ambassador Jeffrey Pyatt, who is now the U.S. ambassador to Greece. And I say that this oil and gas find and the way the U.S. is going about it, Pompeo made a trip recently, and he met with Israel and Cyprus and Egypt, and he kind of solidified the U.S.'s overall control of what's going on in this region and his desire to get Russia out. And like you said, to try and find an alternative solution to finally displace Russian gas, which I think is, you're chasing, a ghost there. I think it's a dream. But Pyatt now, who brought disaster onto the Ukraine, divided the Ukraine, sent it into a downward spiral, created a civil war, caused the deaths of tens of thousands of people. He is now the ambassador in Greece, the U.S. ambassador. He's already signed, sealed, and delivered the North Macedonia deal, which I think in 10, 15 years may pose significant troubles to Greece. We'll see in the Balkan region. You've discussed that at length. But he's now also working his mischief in Cyprus, in Greece. There are reports saying that he's making claims for the Orthodox Church to not support the Russian Orthodox Church and to back this breakaway Ukraine church. There's reports that he's pressing very, very hard for Greece and Cyprus to back away from Russia, to remove Russia from docking at Cypriot ports, from having any kind of contact with the Cypriot and Greek government on any substantial levels. What do you make of the Pyatt factor, and does it, put you at unease here? Does it worry you?
It worries me incredibly because, of course, what he is trying to do, and I think it's becoming increasingly obvious, is he's trying to divide Greece and Cyprus from Russia, and doing so in a way that seems to be intended at the moment to set Greece and Cyprus, not just against Russia, but against Turkey also, which is an alarming thing. And I think we're both aware of this proposed bill that's now going through the Senate in the United States at the moment, which I believe, by the way, has Pyatt's fingerprints all over it, which is basically saying that the United States will give all kinds of financial and economic support to Cyprus and also military support. It will start to supply Cyprus with weapons and training for its military, but in return, the Cypriots must not only agree not to allow Russian warships to dock in Cyprus and refuel there, but they must also, and this I find particularly sinister, provide lists of all the sort of people who might be involved in Russian disinformation operations from Cyprus and might own newspapers there, which I find very, very disturbing, and that they should also support this schismatic church that Pyatt has launched in Ukraine. So he's interfering with people's religious feelings, and he's interfering in Greek and Cypriot church affairs, because I think it's fair to say that most Orthodox people in these two countries do not support the schismatic church. Now,
and we were just to interrupt real briefly, Alexander, we were one of the first channels that actually created the connection between Pyatt and Bartholomew, the Patriarch of Constantinople, and actually connected, Pyatt to being kind of the mastermind behind this breakaway church in Ukraine. And now it looks like, what we said is confirmed.
Yes, absolutely. And as I said, he's still playing this game, even as, oddly enough, not oddly enough at all, I mean, even as the climate of opinion in Ukraine seems to be changing, but one can't help feeling that he's still playing his games with Ukraine, and he's using Greece and Cyprus to continue playing that game in Ukraine by trying to, play Orthodox churches off against each other. And I completely agree, by the way, with what you said about the North Macedonian thing. It's going to create huge problems for Greece going down the line. If Pyatt succeeds with these intrigues that he is engaging in, the risk is that he will do the same again, because he will create a situation where Greece and Cyprus become dependent on the US in potential conflicts with Turkey and Russia having been a historic friend of the Greeks, but possibly coming even more closely together with Turkey than it is now. And I think that's a very dangerous situation for the Greeks in the long term, because Greece has always looked to Russia to balance against Turkey. And the very last thing we want, it seems to me, is to see a situation where we are on bad terms with both the Greeks, with both the Russians and the Turks, and are essentially isolated from them. So Pyatt has his complicated games, but they're not, I think, in Greek and Cypriot interests. Yes, I happen to believe that at this particular juncture, Cyprus needs to have close relations with the United States. I said in an earlier program that we did that Cyprus tilting to the United States at this time makes sense. And I think Cyprus should always seek good relations with the United States. But it's one thing to have good relations with the United States. It's another thing to be part of a pawn in a US geopolitical game, which could turn out very badly for us.
Yeah, and Cyprus is in no position to handle, that type of that type of responsibility, or to deal with these types of forces. Pyatt is extremely sinister, and Greece at this moment, Greece has as the U.S. ambassador, someone who is extremely dangerous, I think. Very dangerous for Greece. And I think you're exactly right, Alexander. Greece and Cyprus they have historically done an excellent job, probably the best job in Europe, in my opinion, of balancing the United States, Russia, Israel, and the Arab and Islamic nations. I mean, Greece has always done, and Cyprus, they've done a really good job on the diplomatic front of balancing all these different forces, ideologies, and nations. And it looks like Pyatt is coming in, and he's looking to create clear divisions and separations for Greece and Cyprus, especially on the Russian front.
Exactly. That's exactly what he's doing. And as I said, this is a geopolitical game of the sort that the United States loves. It's already some people in the United States love. It treats countries as pawns in the game. And as I said, we can't afford in Greece and Cyprus to be pawns, because this is our region ultimately. And it's extremely dangerous for us to let ourselves be sucked into those sort of games. These games serve American interests, which may be transitory. They do not serve our long-term interests. Certainly, we want to have excellent relations with the United States, and that is something that, is undoubted. But we can't afford to be enlisted as warriors, or rather as pawns in a game which could go very badly wrong for us, and for which, to be very clear, if it does go wrong, it will be Greeks and Cypriots, not Americans, that will pay the big price.
Yeah, they will pay a very heavy price. And I'll state what I said in my previous video, in that if the Cypriots and the Greeks think that the U.S. will put their interests ahead of Turkey's, should Turkey decide to move away from Russia and go back to the U.S. and restart warm relations, start warming up their relations with the U.S., then the Greeks and Cypriots are sadly mistaken. Because I'll say it once, I'll say it 1,000 times, when it comes to foreign policy for the United States, it's Israel first, Turkey second, and everyone else, even the UK, they take a backseat. Those are the two countries that the U.S. will always put on the top of the list, in my opinion. And I'll also say another thing, Alexander. I'm currently in Cyprus. I was in Greece. I didn't see many Russian tourists in Athens, though there were there. I saw a lot of American tourists. In Cyprus, we've had a steep drop-off, very steep drop-off in Russian tourists. I mean, it's noticeable. And so you can see that the separation is already starting to take effect, at least in the tourist sector. And I am noticing it. So that's what's going on the ground as well. Any final thoughts, Alexander, on this topic?
Yes, I think it's coming back to what we've been saying. It's a priority for Cyprus and for Greece that we achieve a good settlement of the Cypriot conflict, but that should not come with Greece and Cyprus signing up to some complicated geopolitical game. I hope that Anastasiadis, who I think is a clever man, and Mitsotakis, who I know less about, I hope that they have the wisdom and the strength of character to resist these complex geopolitical games, which, as I say, don't serve our interests at all.
And I also hope that Akiji in North Cyprus, who's in the past been willing to find a solution to the Cyprus problem, I hope that he also finds the strength to negotiate for a final settlement.
Exactly. It serves everybody's interests. Playing geopolitics to the plan of someone like Pyatt doesn't. And that's true of everybody, all the people there. Well, Greeks, Cypriots, Turks, all of them.
Well said. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran, thank you very much. Guys, if you like this video, click on the subscribe button down below and click on the notifications bell to make sure you get notifications every time we push out a new video. You can get an audio copy of this video. Follow us on Soundcloud and iTunes. And please donate to us on PayPal, Patreon, and Subscribestar. That really helps out the channel a lot. And what also helps us out a lot is if you purchase from the Duran shop a t-shirt like the one that Alexander is wearing today, or a really beautiful mug like the one that Alexander is drinking coffee out of, which is a new
Coffee out
twist.
of. It's a new twist. I mean, I do drink coffee quite a lot, actually. I mean, but not usually so late in the day. I mean, I usually have coffee for breakfast, but this is a wonderful mug to drink coffee from. It's a really powerful, as I said, coffee. It's from Sumatra, from the island of Sumatra. One of the oldest coffees, by the way, developed by Dutch settlers in the 18th century, sort of coffee that Voltaire might have drunk. And what a perfect mug to drink it from. 15 ounces, beautiful porcelain. And this one, of course, has the badge of Alpha, the elite special unit of Russia, which captured the palace in Kabul, from Hafizullah Amin in 1979, and I gather that there's about 30 of them, and they took on about 600 bodyguards and soldiers, and they beat them, and they've also beaten jihadis and ISIS in Syria, in Chechnya, in all kinds of places. So this is a great mug to drink that kind of coffee from. Really strong coffee, a really strong mug with a really strong badge of a really strong military force. And here I am, I'm drinking it whilst wearing one of our t-shirts. It's the first Duran t-shirt I've actually had. It's a great t-shirt, 100% cotton, with our double-headed eagle, our own badge there. You can see it. It's a wonderful t-shirt, best quality. You look great in it, you feel great in it. Help the Duran by buying it, and buy a mug like this, or the other sorts of mugs that we also have on our shop.
All right, and the link for the Duran shop is in the description box down below. Alexander Mercouris, Editor-in-Chief of the Duran, thank you very much. Until next time, everybody, take care.